Hello, my name is Sarah. Before I share my story, I want to ask you something. Have you ever given so much of yourself that you woke up one day and didn't recognize the person in the mirror? If you have, tell me in the comments. I want to know I'm not alone. What you are about to hear is not a condemnation of caregiving. To care for another human being is perhaps the most noble thing we can do. It is love in action. It is sacred. But what happened to me wasn't sacred. It was theft. I wasn't their daughter. I wasn't their niece. I didn't owe them anything by blood. I was just the woman who lived in the yellow house across the street. A neighbor. A friend. Someone who is simply there. Chapter 1. The day I became necessary. You don't wake up one morning and sign a contract giving away your freedom. It happens much more subtly than that. You slide into it, inch by inch. It begins with a single favor, a small act of kindness. I remember the first time vividly. It was a Tuesday, a gray, unremarkable Tuesday. Eleanor Matthews called me. I can still hear her voice, shaky, fragile, perfectly calibrated to spark guilt. Everyone else is busy, she said. My children have such important lives. Could you just drive me to the clinic? I said yes. Of course I said yes. We are taught to be good neighbors. We are taught to help. The drive was quiet. I remember the smell of her perfume, lavender, and something sharp, like antiseptic. She asked me questions about my life, about my job, about my free time. At the time, I thought she was being polite. Now I know she was interviewing me. She was measuring the empty spaces in my life, calculating exactly how much of me she could consume. When we returned, she insisted I stay for tea. "You're such a dear," she told me, patting my hand. "My own children are so busy, but you make time." It was a compliment wrapped in a comparison. I felt special. I felt seen. I didn't realize I was being groomed. That tea became a weekly ritual, then twice a week. Then it wasn't just tea. It was, "Can you pick up this prescription? Can you sort this mail? Can you listen to me complain about the gardener?" I was becoming indispensable. And like a fool, I mistook it for being loved. The real shift, the moment the trap actually snapped shut, happened a month later. Her daughter called me, breathless and frantic. "Mom's not feeling well, and we have a non-refundable getaway planned. We can't cancel. Can you just check on her this weekend?" Just check on her. I canceled my own plans. I had a date that weekend. I canceled it. I went over. I didn't just check on her. I stayed the whole weekend. I cooked 3 meals a day. I cleaned the kitchen. I read to her until my voice was hoarse. When the family returned, tan and rested, they didn't apologize for ruining my weekend. They didn't offer to pay me. They cheered. "We don't know what we'd do without you, Sarah," they exclaimed. That phrase, "We don't know what we'd do without you." It sounded like gratitude, but it was actually a cage. It meant I wasn't allowed to leave. It meant that if I walked away, their collapse would be my fault. And so I stayed. Not because I wanted to, but because they had successfully convinced me that I was the only thing holding their world together. Chapter 2. Who they were before they needed me. To understand why I stayed, you have to understand who the Matthews family was before the stroke. You have to see them through my eyes, the eyes of a woman who lived in a small yellow house across the street, looking at a castle. The Matthews family was respected. That's the word everyone used. Respected. They were comfortable, organized, polite. They were the kind of family that sent handwritten Christmas cards on heavy, cream-colored paper. I remember watching them from my kitchen window. Eleanor, always impeccable in her garden, wearing a wide-brimmed hat, pruning roses that seemed afraid to grow incorrectly in her presence. Her children, James and Claire, would visit on Sundays. James drove a silver sedan that looked like it cost more than my entire house. He walked with the stride of a man who managed empires. Claire was effortless, silk scarves, easy laughter, the kind of woman who never seemed to sweat. They looked like a painting, a portrait of the American dream. I didn't know then that portraits are flat. They have no depth. They hide the cracks in the wall behind them. I admired them. I think, in a way, I wanted to be like them. So when they waved at me or invited me over for a glass of lemonade in the summer, I felt chosen. I felt like I was being elevated. Then the illness arrived. It didn't arrive loudly. It didn't crash through the front door like a burglar. It crept in quietly, disguised as temporary support. It started with Eleanor seeming a bit more tired than usual, a bit more forgetful. Then came the stroke. I remember the ambulance lights flashing against my living room wall at 2 a.m. I stood on my porch, wrapped in a robe, watching them wheel her out. James and Claire arrived separately, looking annoyed rather than terrified. I saw James checking his watch while the paramedics loaded his mother. I saw Claire on her phone, pacing, likely canceling a brunch reservation. That should have been my first warning. Their mother was possibly dying, and they were managing their schedules. Eleanor survived, but the woman who came back wasn't the woman who pruned roses. She was partially paralyzed. Her sharp mind was still there, but her body had betrayed her. She needed help. Real help. Her children lived busy lives. That's what they told everyone. James is in finance, you know. He can't step away. Claire runs a gallery. She's indispensable. They wrapped their selfishness in the language of success. They couldn't possibly be expected to change adult diapers or spoon-feed soup. That work was beneath them. But I lived nearby. I lived right across the street. I had a flexible job. I had no children of my own. That made me useful. And in the economy of the Matthews family, usefulness was the only currency that mattered. I didn't see it then. I thought I was stepping in to help neighbors in a crisis. I didn't realize I was stepping into a vacuum that they had created, a space where love should have been, but where only obligation existed. I walked across the street with a casserole dish in my hands, thinking I was bringing dinner. I didn't know I was walking into a prison that I would help build for myself. Chapter 3. How temporary became permanent. If you boil a frog slowly, they say it doesn't jump out. I never liked that saying. It implies the frog is stupid. It doesn't account for the fact that maybe the water feels warm at first. Maybe the frog thinks it's a bath. That's how it was with the Matthews family. The temperature rose so slowly, I didn't realize I was burning until my skin was already peeling. At first, the requests were small, manageable. Checking in on her lunch hour, driving her to a physical therapy appointment because James had a meeting and Claire was in Milan. Cooking a simple meal because Mom loves your lasagna, Sarah. It's the only thing she eats. It felt good to be needed. It felt good to be the one who could fix things. Then, the requests grew. They changed shape. I remember the day James gave me the key. It was a heavy brass key on a leather fob. He pressed it into my hand with a look of solemn trust. "So you don't have to knock," he said. "So you can just come in. You're practically family anyway." I looked at that key and saw a symbol of trust. I didn't see what it really was, a shackle. That key meant I no longer had to be invited. It meant I was expected. It dissolved the boundary between my life and theirs. Soon, I wasn't just cooking lasagna. I was administering medication. Eleanor had a pill organizer the size of a briefcase. Blood thinners, statins, pain blockers. At first, I was terrified I'd make a mistake. I double-checked every label. I called the pharmacist. James and Claire? They didn't even know the names of the drugs their mother was taking. "You're so good with details, Sarah," Claire would say, waving a hand. "We trust you completely." Trust. That was another weaponized word. They trusted me to do the things they didn't want to touch. Then came the nights. It started with a bad reaction to a new medication. Eleanor was dizzy, vomiting. I stayed until midnight holding a basin for her. Then 1 a.m. By 2 a.m., it didn't make sense to walk across the street. "Just sleep on the couch," Eleanor whispered, her voice weak. "Just in case." That couch. It was an Italian leather sofa that probably cost $10,000. It was beautiful to look at and torture to sleep on. It was cold, slippery, and hard. I lay there in the dark, listening to the grandfather clock tick in the hallway, listening for Eleanor's breathing. I woke up the next morning with a stiff neck and a headache. James stopped by at 9 a.m. with coffee for himself. "You're an angel, Sarah," he said, stepping over my makeshift bed of blankets to get to the kitchen. "We couldn't do this without you. You're part of the family now," Claire told me later that week when I canceled my book club to take Eleanor to a cardiologist. Part of the family. I remember a dinner they hosted a month later. It was Eleanor's birthday. They ordered catering from the best French restaurant in the city. They toasted her with expensive champagne. They toasted me, too. To Sarah, James announced, raising his glass. Our savior. Everyone clapped. I smiled, blushing. But when the dinner ended, James and Claire went into the living room to open gifts with their mother. And I went into the kitchen to scrape the plates. I loaded the dishwasher. I wiped down the counters. That was the reality of being part of the family. I wasn't a member. I was the help. But because they paid me in compliments instead of cash, I couldn't even quit. You can resign from a job. How do you resign from being an angel? Chapter 4. The years that disappeared. Time is a strange thing when you are a caretaker. It compresses. It stretches. Days bleed into weeks, and weeks bleed into years, marked only by pill refills and doctor's appointments. You stop looking at calendars for holidays. You look at them for open slots where you might be able to squeeze in a dentist appointment for yourself, if you're lucky. They say youth is wasted on the young. I think time is wasted on those who are free. I had time once. I had weekends. I had evenings. Then, slowly, I had none. The isolation didn't happen all at once. It happened one declined invitation at a time. I remember my friend Julia's wedding. We had been close since college. She asked me to be a bridesmaid. I was thrilled. I bought the dress, a soft lavender chiffon. I booked the flight. 2 days before the wedding, Eleanor fell in the shower. Nothing was broken, but she was bruised, shaken. I called James. I have a flight in 48 hours, I said. You need to come stay with her. I can't, he said, his voice clipped. I'm closing a deal in Tokyo. It's impossible. I called Claire. I have a gallery opening, she said. It's the biggest night of my year, Sarah. You know that. But it's Julia's wedding, I pleaded. Mom needs you, Claire said, her voice dropping to that dangerous, guilt-inducing whisper. She depends on you, Sarah. She doesn't feel safe with anyone else. She depends on you. The ultimate trump card. I canceled the flight. I sent a gift. I hung the lavender dress in the back of my closet, where it gathered dust like a ghost of the life I was supposed to be living. Julia was understanding at first. But after the 3rd time I canceled plans, the 4th time I didn't return a call because I was too exhausted to speak, the invitations stopped coming. Friendships require maintenance. I had nothing left to give them. Then there was the promotion. My boss called me into his office. We want to make you a team lead, he said. It comes with a raise. Travel. More responsibility. I looked at him and felt a surge of excitement, followed immediately by a crushing weight. Travel? Late nights? Who would give Eleanor her 6 p.m. insulin? Who would make sure she didn't leave the stove on? I can't, I told him. I have family obligations. He looked at me with pity. That was the worst part. The pity. People started to assume this was my choice. I ran into an old acquaintance at the grocery store one afternoon. I was buying adult incontinence pads and pureed pears. It's so wonderful what you're doing, she said, touching my arm. Dedicating your life to her. You're a saint. I nodded. I smiled. It was easier to accept the sainthood than to explain that I felt like a hostage. How do you explain that you are staying because you're afraid of what will happen if you leave? How do you explain that she depends on you feels less like a compliment and more like a threat? Birthdays passed quietly. I turned 35 blowing out a candle on a cupcake alone in my kitchen while Eleanor slept across the street. I turned 40 in a hospital waiting room while Eleanor got a hip replacement. My mirror became an enemy. I saw gray hairs arriving, not as badges of wisdom, but as tally marks of time stolen. I saw lines around my eyes that weren't from laughing. I was aging. I was fading. And across the street, in the big house, they were thriving. James bought a vacation home in Aspen. Claire got featured in a magazine. Eleanor lived on, sustained by my energy, my time, my life. I was the fuel they burned to keep their lives bright. And I was running out. Chapter 5. The control I didn't notice. Control isn't always a fist. Sometimes it's a sigh. Sometimes it's a look of disappointment so profound it makes you want to tear your own heart out just to make it stop. Eleanor Matthews didn't yell. She was too refined for that. Yelling is for people who lose control. Eleanor never lost control. She simply took it. She noticed everything. I remember a Tuesday when I was 10 minutes late. There was an accident on the bridge. Traffic was gridlocked. I called. I texted. I ran from my car to her front door, breathless, apologizing before I even turned the key. "I'm so sorry, Eleanor," I gasped. The traffic was a nightmare. She was sitting in her armchair, staring out the window. She didn't look at me. She didn't check her watch. She just smiled, a small, thin, fertile smile. "It's fine, dear," she said softly. I waited to take my medication because I get nervous doing it alone. But it's fine. I'm sure 10 minutes won't matter. She didn't scream. She didn't scold. She just planted a seed of terror in my chest. Asterisk, what if it did matter? What if she had a stroke because I was stuck in traffic? Asterisk. I spent the next 3 hours hovering around her, bringing her water, fluffing her pillows, desperate to earn back her warmth. And when she finally gave it to me, when she finally patted my hand and said, "You're good to me," Sarah, the relief was so intense it felt like a drug. I didn't realize then that she was training me, like a dog. It wasn't just lateness. It was everything. If I bought the wrong brand of soup, the store brand instead of the organic one she liked, she wouldn't complain. She would just look at the bowl, stir it once, and set her spoon down. "Is something wrong?" I'd ask. No, she'd say. "It's just a bit salty today. My stomach is sensitive. But don't worry, I'm just not hungry." She would starve herself to punish me for buying the wrong soup. And I would rush back to the store, buying the expensive brand with my own money, just to see her eat. She withheld. Approval. Gratitude. Warmth. She treated affection like water in a drought, dispensing it only when I performed exactly as she wanted. I stopped taking personal calls in her house. Once, my sister called me. I stepped into the hallway to answer. I was laughing at a joke my sister made. When I came back into the living room, Eleanor was wiping her eyes. "What's wrong?" I asked. "Nothing," she sniffed. It's nice to hear you laugh. You used to laugh with me like that. I suppose I'm just a burden now. Not fun like your sister." I hung up the phone. I sat with her. I assured her she wasn't a burden. I never took a call in her earshot again. I learned quickly that compliance brought peace. Resistance brought silence. And the silence was unbearable. It was a masterclass in manipulation. She made me feel that I was the one failing her, even as I was giving her everything I had. That's how control works when it's subtle. You don't see the bars of the cage because you're too busy trying to keep the keeper happy. You think you're free because the door is unlocked, but you never leave because you're afraid of the look on her face if you do. Chapter 6. When my body started failing. They say the body keeps the score. My body didn't just keep the score, it started screaming it. Caretakers aren't supposed to get sick. We are the ones who hold the bucket, who fetch the medicine, who smooth the sheets. We are the infrastructure. Bridges aren't supposed to get tired. Roads aren't supposed to weep. But I did. It started with the sleep, or the lack of it. I would wake up at 3 a.m., my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The first time it happened, I thought I was dying. I sat on the edge of my bed, gasping for air, clutching my chest. I didn't call an ambulance. I was afraid the sirens would wake Eleanor across the street. Even in my own panic, my first thought was her convenience. Then came the exhaustion. Not the kind of tired you feel after a long run or a hard day's work. This was a bone-deep, marrow-level weariness. It felt like I was wading through wet concrete just to walk to the mailbox. My doctor, Dr. Evans, looked at my blood work and frowned. "Your cortisol levels are through the roof, Sarah," she said. "Your blood pressure is up. You've lost weight you didn't have to lose. You need rest. Real rest." I laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. "Rest isn't an option," I told her. "I have people counting on me. If you don't stop," she warned, "your body will stop for you." She was right. 2 weeks later, I was helping Eleanor out of the bath. She was dead weight, slippery with soap and water. I should have waited for the lift equipment James promised to buy but never did. But Eleanor was shivering. She was cold, so I tried to lift her myself. Something in my lower back snapped. It wasn't a sound. It was a sensation. A hot, electric line of fire shot down my leg. I gasped, dropping to one knee, barely managing to keep Eleanor from falling. Sarah, she cried, annoyed. Be careful. Not, are you okay? Not, did you hurt yourself? Just be careful. Because if I broke, who would dry her off? I limped for weeks. I took ibuprofen like candy. And finally, I reached my breaking point. I sat James down in his mother's living room. He was scrolling through emails on his phone, barely looking up. I opened my mouth. I had rehearsed what I wanted to say. I wanted to say, James, I'm hurt. I'm tired. I can't do this anymore. You need to hire someone. But he sensed it. He sensed my weakness the way a shark senses blood in the water. He put his phone down and cut me off before I could speak. You know, Sarah, he said, looking at me with those cool, blue eyes. I was just telling Claire how lucky we are. Look at us. Claire is a mess. I'm barely keeping my head above water at the firm. Mom is. Mom. But you. He walked over and placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. You're our rock. You're the strong one. You always have been. The words died in my throat. I couldn't say I'm weak after he just told me I was strong. He had bricked up the doorway before I could even walk through it. Strength. They used it like a compliment, but it was a trap. By labeling me the strong one, they revoked my right to be weak. They revoked my right to need. A rock doesn't need sleep. A rock doesn't need a day off. A rock exists to be stepped on. Just a little longer, he said, squeezing my shoulder. Once things stabilize, maybe we can all take a breath. But right now, we need you to power through. I nodded. I swallowed my pain. I swallowed my plea for help. Because I was strong. And because being strong was the only identity I had left. I didn't know then that power through is just another way of saying break down slowly. Chapter 7. The first time I realized I was replaceable. When the nurse arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, my first feeling wasn't fear. It wasn't jealousy. It was relief. Profound, weeping relief. Her name was Brenda. She was hired by the insurance company for a temporary assessment. I looked at her crisp blue scrubs and efficient shoes and thought, thank God. Finally, help. I wanted her to take over. I wanted to hand her the keys, the pill organizer, and the weight of the last 3 years. I was so tired I could have slept for a decade. But that relief didn't last long. Not because I wanted the work back. I would have gladly given Brenda the whole load, but because of how they treated the transition. Brenda was a professional. She was detached. She didn't care about Eleanor's garden or her stories. She did her job, checked her watch, and left. And Eleanor loved her. Brenda is so knowledgeable, Eleanor said one evening while I was plating her dinner. She says I should be elevating my legs differently. She says the way we've been doing it puts too much pressure on my hips. She meant me. I've been elevating them the way the doctor said, I replied, trying to keep my voice even. Eleanor waved a hand, dismissing me. Well, Brenda says this way is better. She is such a gentle touch. Very professional. The word stung. Professional. It wasn't that I wanted to be the one lifting her legs. It was that for 3 years, I had done it with love, for free, while my own body broke down. And now, a stranger who was on the payroll was being praised for doing it better. Then the correction started. Small things. Tiny cuts. I was folding a blanket on the couch. Not like that, Sarah, Eleanor snapped. I froze. What? Brenda folds it in thirds, she said. It stays better that way. It looks neater. I looked at the blanket. I had folded it the same way for 3 years. I wanted to scream, then let Brenda fold it. Let Brenda do the laundry and the cooking and the cleaning. But I didn't. I just felt a cold hollowness spreading in my chest. I wasn't thanked as much. The "you're an angel" comments dried up. Instead, I got, "Did you remember to write down the blood pressure? And Brenda thinks we should switch pharmacies." I realized then that my sacrifice meant nothing to them. It wasn't currency. It was just a convenience. And now that a more convenient option had arrived, one that came with a uniform and insurance, my value was plummeting. I didn't panic. I just felt empty. I should have seen the writing on the wall. To the Matthews family, people were like appliances. You use the toaster until it breaks or until a newer, shinier model comes along. I wasn't a daughter. I wasn't a friend. I was a stopgap. I remember standing in the kitchen, listening to Eleanor laugh at something Brenda said in the other room. It was a light, easy laugh. I didn't want my job back. I wanted my dignity back. I wanted them to acknowledge that I had given them everything when they had nothing. But they were already moving on, upgrading to the professional model, and leaving me in the dust. Chapter 8. The day I was asked to step back. You can't be fired if you are never hired. You can't be laid off if you never had a contract. But you can be discarded. You can be erased. On a Sunday evening, Claire texted me, "Pop over. We need to talk." I walked across the street, my back aching, my spirit exhausted. Part of me, a large, desperate part of me, hoped they were going to set me free. I hoped they would say, "Sarah, we see how tired you are. We love you. Go rest." I wanted to leave. God, I wanted to leave. But I wanted to leave as a friend. I wanted to walk out the front door, not be shoved out the back. They were in the dining room. No food, just water. "Sit down," James said. He didn't offer me a glass. "We've made some decisions," Claire said, not looking me in the eye. She was picking lint off her cashmere sweater. "About Mom. We're bringing in a full-time team," James said flatly. "Professionals. Starting tomorrow." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Relief washed over me, hot and dizzying. "Oh," I whispered. That's good. She needs that." "Yes," Claire said, finally looking at me. Her eyes were cold. "She does. She needs proper care. Consistent care." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Consistent, as if I hadn't been there every day for 3 years. As if I hadn't been the only consistent thing in her life. "So," James said, checking his watch, "we think it's best if you step back." "Completely." "Completely?" I asked. "We don't want to confuse her," Claire added quickly. "If you keep popping in, she might not bond with the new staff. It's better if you just stay away for a while." Stay away. It wasn't a concern for my health. It wasn't a kindness. It was an eviction. They weren't setting me free. They were throwing me out. "I understand," I said, though I didn't. I didn't understand how they could look at the woman who had washed their mother's sheets and spoon-fed her soup and treat her like a vendor who had lost a contract. "Great," James said. "We'll need your key back." "My key?" "Security," he shrugged. "Can't have loose keys floating around. You understand. Loose keys. That's what I was now. A loose end. A security risk." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the heavy brass key. I placed it on the table. It made a small, pathetic thud. "Thanks," James said, pocketing it immediately. "You should go," Claire said, standing up. "The agency is coming early tomorrow. We have a lot to prep." I stood up. My back screamed. My heart screamed louder. I walked to the door. Neither of them followed me. Neither of them opened it for me. I wanted to turn around and scream, "I gave you 3 years. I gave you my back. I gave you my life." But I knew it wouldn't matter. To them, I wasn't a person who had given a gift. I was a tool that had served its purpose. And now that the job was done, you don't say thank you to the hammer. You just put it back in the dark. Chapter 9. How they erased me. The erasure wasn't violent. It was quiet. It was efficient. It was the closing of a book that you never intend to read again. Within 48 hours of handing back my key, I was gone. There was no goodbye dinner. There was no cake. There was no card signed by the whole family saying, "We'll miss you." There was just a box on my front porch. I came home from the grocery store 2 days later and found it sitting there. A plain cardboard box. No note. No bow. Just my name scrawled on the side in Claire's perfect, loopy handwriting. Sarah. I carried it inside and opened it on my kitchen table. Inside was a sweater I had left on their coat rack. A coffee mug I used to drink from every morning, the one with the chip in the rim. A pair of reading glasses I thought I had lost. And my heating pad, the one I had used on my back after lifting Eleanor. They had swept through the house, collected every trace of my existence, and deposited it on my doorstep like a bag of leaves. It was a transaction. Asterisk, here are your things. We are square, asterisk. I waited for a text. A call. Surely Eleanor would call. Surely she would wonder where I was. But my phone stayed silent. I sent a text to Claire a week later. I couldn't help myself. Just checking in, I wrote. How is she adjusting to the new team? I watched the 3 little dots appear and disappear for 10 minutes. Finally, a response came. She's doing great. The agency is wonderful. Thanks for asking. Cheery. Polite. Final. It was the kind of text you send to a distant cousin you only see at funerals. It was a door slamming in my face. I became a ghost in my own neighborhood. I would drive past their house at night. I would see the lights on in the living room, the warm, golden glow that I used to be part of. I would see the silhouette of a stranger moving in the kitchen, my kitchen. I saw the agency van parked in the driveway where James's silver sedan used to be. I saw Eleanor once. She was being wheeled down the driveway by a woman in blue scrubs. The woman was tucking a blanket around Eleanor's knees, probably folded in thirds, just the way she liked it. Eleanor looked frail. She looked older. I slowed my car. I almost rolled down the window to wave. But then Eleanor looked up. Her eyes swept over my car. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just looked through me as if I were part of the scenery, as if I were a tree or a lamppost. That hurt more than the anger, the indifference. I realized then that to them, I wasn't a person with a history. I was a chapter they wanted to close. I was a reminder of the messy, chaotic, desperate time when they didn't know what to do. I was the witness to their negligence. And nobody likes a witness. So they erased me. They scrubbed me from the narrative. They rewrote the story so that the professional team had always been the plan, and I was just a blip, a smudge on the lens. Years of sacrifice, 3 Christmases, countless dinners, a broken back, all of it reduced to a cardboard box on a porch and a silence so loud it deafened me. I sat in my yellow house across the street, surrounded by the things they had returned to me, and realized I had nothing else. I had built my entire life around them. I had hollowed myself out to make room for their needs. And now that they were gone, I was just hollow. Chapter 10. The aftermath I carried alone. They say nature abhors a vacuum. But grief? Grief loves a vacuum. It rushes in to fill any empty space you leave behind. And I had left a lot of empty space. I had hollowed out my life to make room for the Matthews family. I had pushed out my friends, my hobbies, my career, my sleep schedule. I had turned myself into a vessel for their needs. Now that they were gone, I wasn't just alone. I was empty. The first week was the hardest. I call it the withdrawal. I would wake up at 2 a.m., heart racing, convinced I heard Eleanor calling my name. Asterisk Sarah. Sarah, I need you. Asterisk, I would be out of bed and halfway to the door before I remembered. She wasn't calling me. She was across the street, sleeping soundly, or maybe not sleeping, I didn't know anymore, under the care of a woman in blue scrubs who got paid to be there. I would stand in my living room, in the dark, trembling. The silence of my own house, which used to be a sanctuary, now felt like a tomb. It was too quiet. It was accusing. Then there were the phantom habits. I went to the grocery store on a Tuesday. I walked in, grabbed a cart, and found myself on aisle 4 before I realized what I was doing. I was standing in front of the adult incontinence pads. I reached for the brand Eleanor liked, the one with the purple label, not the green one, because the green ones chaffed. My hand hovered over the package, and then it hit me. I didn't need them. I would never need to buy them again. I stood there in the middle of the grocery store, under the buzzing fluorescent lights, and started to cry. Not a pretty, cinematic cry. An ugly, gasping sob. People stared. A stockboy asked if I was okay. I abandoned my cart and ran out to my car. It wasn't just the emotional toll. It was the financial wreckage they left behind. I sat down with my bank statements one night. It was a horror story told in numbers. Gas money for driving Eleanor to appointments. Copays I had covered when she forgot her purse. The organic soup. The heating pads, the ergonomic pillows I bought because James wouldn't, the missed shifts at my own job because I was too exhausted to work or because Eleanor had an emergency. I did the math. In 3 years, I had spent thousands of dollars of my own money on a woman who lived in a mortgage-free mansion, and I had lost tens of thousands in potential income. I was broke. I was broken. And I was alone. I looked out my window at their house. It looked the same. The lights were on. The grass was cut. The agency van was in the driveway. They had seamlessly swapped me out. They hadn't missed a beat. Their lives continued uninterrupted, unburdened. They were relieved. They were untouched. I was the only one bleeding. I realized then that I had been an accessory to my own destruction. I had let them do this. I had said yes when I should have said no. I had stayed when I should have run. But realizing it didn't fix it. It just added shame to the grief. I spent my nights pacing my small yellow house, haunting my own life, wondering how I was supposed to rebuild a foundation when I had given away all my bricks. Chapter 11. When their foundation started cracking. It took exactly 3 weeks for the cracks to show. I watched it happen from my living room window. It was like watching a slow-motion car crash, except I wasn't in the car. I was on the sidewalk, safe, but unable to look away. Brenda, the efficient nurse in the blue scrubs, was the first to go. I didn't see her leave, but I saw the new van arrive. Different logo, different driver. Then, 4 days later, another van. Then another. The agency staff were professionals, yes, but professionals have boundaries. Professionals have shifts. Professionals don't let you verbally abuse them. They don't let you starve yourself to punish them. They clock out. And Eleanor? Eleanor didn't understand boundaries. She was used to me. She was used to someone who would absorb her anger like a sponge. The professionals didn't absorb it. They reflected it back. One afternoon, I was watering my garden, something I finally had time to do, when I heard shouting. Real shouting. It was coming from across the street. The front door flew open, and a young woman in scrubs stormed out. She was crying. She marched to her car, threw her bag in the back seat, and sped off, leaving tire marks on James's pristine driveway. James arrived 20 minutes later, looking frantic. He was on his phone, pacing the lawn, his tie loosened, his hair a mess. "What do you mean she quit?" I heard him yell, "We pay for premium care. Send someone else. Send someone who can handle her." Handle her. As if his mother were a wild animal. The neighborhood gossip mill, which had been dormant, suddenly roared to life. Mrs. Gable from down the street caught me at the mailbox. "Did you hear?" she whispered, eyes wide. "Eleanor bit a nurse. Actually bit her. On the hand." I wasn't surprised. Eleanor bit with words. It was only a matter of time before she used her teeth. And the soup incident? Mrs. Gable continued. Apparently, she threw a bowl of tomato bisque at the wall because it wasn't the right temperature. Ruined the wallpaper. I nodded, saying nothing. I knew about the soup. I knew exactly what temperature she liked it. I knew she liked it lukewarm, not hot, because the heat hurt her sensitive gums. I knew that because I had learned it. I had memorized it. The agency staff didn't know. They didn't care to know. They were there to keep her alive, not to keep her happy. And that was the difference. That was the thing James and Claire hadn't calculated. They thought care was a commodity. They thought you could buy it off the shelf like milk. They didn't realize that the kind of care I gave, the kind that anticipates needs, the kind that swallows insults, the kind that stays late just to hold a hand, isn't for sale. It's given. It's a gift. And they had thrown the gift away. Costs ballooned. I saw the invoices in James's face. He looked grayer every time he visited. The premium agency charged extra for difficult patients. They charged for overtime. They charged for the damages. Schedules fell apart. Claire, who had been so relieved to have her freedom back, was suddenly spending her weekends interviewing new agencies because the old ones refused to send staff back to the house. They were learning a hard lesson. They were learning that you can buy labor. You can buy time. You can even buy expertise. But you cannot buy devotion. Devotion is earned. And they had squandered the only person who had ever offered it to them for free. Chapter 12. The suffering they couldn't escape. Chaos has a sound. It sounds like slamming doors. It sounds like raised voices in a driveway at midnight. It sounds like a family tearing itself apart. Without consistency, Eleanor declined. And she declined fast. It turns out that professional care is only as good as the person giving it that day. And when the person changes every day, the care changes every day. One nurse liked the windows open, the next liked them shut. One mashed the potatoes, the next left them chunky. One talked to Eleanor, The next wore headphones and ignored her. Eleanor, who thrived on routine, began to wither. She stopped eating. She stopped talking. She became a ghost in her own home. And the children? The children who had been so united in their decision to fire me were now at war. I heard them arguing in the driveway. It was usually about money. The agency fees are triple what we budgeted. James shouted one evening, waving a piece of paper in Claire's face. "We're burning through the estate." "Well, you're the one who fired Sarah." Claire screamed back. "You said we needed professionals. Now we have them, and you're complaining about the cost." "I didn't fire her. We agreed." "You agreed. I just went along with it." They cast blame like nets, trying to trap anyone but themselves. Care became transactional. It became cold. It became a line item on a spreadsheet that James resented paying and a scheduling headache that Claire resented managing. Finally, they made the decision I knew was coming. I saw the transport van arrive on a rainy Thursday. It wasn't an ambulance. It was a shuttle for Pinecrest Assisted Living. They were moving her. I watched from my window as they wheeled her out. She looked so small. She was wrapped in a gray blanket I didn't recognize. She wasn't fighting. She wasn't yelling. She was just slumped. James and Claire were there, directing the movers who were carrying boxes of her things. They looked relieved. They looked like people who were finally dumping a heavy load at the landfill. Mrs. Gable told me later what happened. Her niece worked at Pinecrest. "It's sad," she told me over the fence. "She hates it there. She refuses to leave her room. She refuses to participate in activities." Then she lowered her voice. "And she asks for you." My heart stopped. "She does?" "Every day," Mrs. Gable said. "She asks the nurses, 'Where is Sarah? When is Sarah coming?' She thinks you're just late. She thinks you're stuck in traffic." I felt tears prick my eyes. "What do they tell her?" Mrs. Gable sighed. "James told the staff to tell her that you moved away. He told them to say you got a new job in another state and couldn't say goodbye. They lied to her. Even at the end, they couldn't give her the dignity of the truth. They couldn't admit that they had pushed me away. So they made me the villain. They made me the one who abandoned her. They took my care, they took my time, and finally, they took my name. They erased me from her memory not by silence, but by rewriting history to make themselves look like the heroes who stepped in when I left. It was the final betrayal. And I couldn't even defend myself because I was just a ghost across the street, watching the rain wash away the tire tracks of the van that took her away. Chapter 13. The call I never expected. They say time heals all wounds. I don't know if that's true. Time creates distance. It creates scar tissue. But the wound is still there underneath. 2 years had passed since the day I handed back my key. 2 years. I had rebuilt my life, brick by painful brick. I got a new job, one with set hours, and a boss who actually paid me. I went to physical therapy for my back. I started saying yes to invitations again. I even went on a few dates. I stopped looking out my front window. I planted a hedge of hydrangeas along the sidewalk, a wall of green to block out the view of the big house across the street. I thought I was free. Then, on a Tuesday evening, it's always a Tuesday, my phone rang. I was in the kitchen, making dinner for myself. A glass of wine on the counter. Music playing. Peace. I looked at the screen. Unknown caller. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. I swiped right. "Hello? Sarah?" The voice was thin. Reedy. It sounded like a ghost. But I knew it instantly. "James." There was a pause. A hesitation. "Hi, Sarah. It's been a while." He didn't sound like the master of the universe anymore. He didn't sound like the man who had dismissed me in his dining room. He sounded tired. He sounded small. "What do you want, James?" I didn't have the energy for pleasantries. We need to talk," he stammered. "About Mom." I gripped the edge of the counter. "Is she okay?" She's not good, Sarah. The facility, it's not working out. They're asking us to move her. She's agitated. She's not eating." He took a ragged breath. "She keeps asking for you." The words landed in the kitchen like a grenade. "She keeps asking for you." "We were wrong," he continued, the words rushing out now. "We made a mistake. The agency, they don't understand her. They don't know her like you do. We were hoping you might consider coming back." I stood there frozen. "Coming back. We'll pay you," he added quickly. "Whatever you want. We'll pay you double what the agency costs. We need you, Sarah. She needs you." There it was again. She needs you, the hook, the trap. For a moment, I felt the old pull, the reflex to say yes, the reflex to save them. I imagined Eleanor in a sterile room, calling my name. I imagined walking back into that house, taking charge, fixing everything. But then I remembered. I remembered the soup. I remembered the couch. I remembered the careful smile on Claire's face when she fired me. I remembered the box on my porch. I remembered how they had erased me. And I realized something. They didn't want me. They didn't miss Sarah. They missed the convenience. They missed the free labor. They missed the person who absorbed their pain so they didn't have to feel it. They weren't calling a friend. They were calling a plumber because the pipes had burst again. "Sarah?" James asked, his voice trembling. "Are you there?" I looked at my glass of wine. I looked at my peaceful kitchen. I looked at the life I had fought so hard to reclaim. "I'm here, James," I said softly. "So, will you? Will you come back?" I closed my eyes. "No." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "No," he whispered. "But she's asking for you." "I know," I said. "And I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry she is suffering. But I can't fix it for you anymore." "But we'll pay you," he cried. "We'll pay you anything." "You can't afford me, James," I said. "Because I'm not for sale anymore." I hung up the phone. I stood there for a long time, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. I thought I would feel guilty. I thought I would feel shame. But all I felt was light. Some absences are earned. And some doors, once closed, must never be opened again. Chapter 14. The End They Deserved. Eleanor died 3 months after James called me. I found out from the newspaper. I opened the Sunday Gazette, and there she was, in black and white. A photo from 20 years ago, before the stroke, before the wheelchair, before the bitterness had etched lines into her face. She looked regal. She looked invincible. The obituary said she passed peacefully at home, surrounded by her loving family. I knew it was a lie. Mrs. Gable told me the truth. Eleanor died in the facility, in the middle of the night. The nurse on duty found her in the morning. James was in Tokyo. Claire was at a fundraiser. She died surrounded by strangers, the blue-scrubbed professionals they had paid to be there because they couldn't be bothered. But the obituary looked nice. And to the Matthews family, appearances were the only reality that mattered. I went to the funeral. I don't know why. Maybe for closure. Maybe to bear witness. I stood in the back of the church. The pews were sparse. For a woman who had been so respected, there were remarkably few people there to say goodbye. Respect is cold. It doesn't bring people out in the rain on a Tuesday morning. Love does. And Eleanor hadn't cultivated love. I saw James and Claire in the front row. They stood 3 feet apart. They didn't touch. They didn't speak. They looked exhausted, hollowed out, their expensive clothes hanging loosely on their frames. They looked like strangers who had been forced to share a cab. When the service ended, I slipped out before they could see me. I didn't want their pity. I didn't want their apologies. And I certainly didn't want to hear them ask if I would help clean out the house. The estate sale happened a month later. I walked across the street and into the house for the first time in 2 years. It smelled stale. It smelled of abandonment. Strangers were wandering through the rooms, picking up Eleanor's crystal vases, haggling over the price of her silver. I saw a woman holding the teapot, the one I had used to make tea for Eleanor hundreds of times. $5, the woman said. "Make it 3, the estate agent replied. $3. All those afternoons, all those conversations, all that grooming, reduced to a $3 transaction. I walked into the living room. The Italian leather couch, the one I had slept on, the one that had ruined my back, was there. It had a price tag taped to the armrest. Asterisk, leather sofa, $800. Must move today. Asterisk. I looked at it and felt nothing. No anger. No pain. Just a quiet sense of justice. The object that had caused me so much suffering was now being sold to the highest bidder, just like everything else in this house. Mrs. Gable told me the rest. "They're suing each other," she whispered over the fence as the for sale sign went up in the yard. "James says Claire spent too much of the inheritance on agency fees. Claire says James mismanaged the investments." They aren't speaking. They had lost the money. They had lost the house. They had lost their mother. But most of all, they had lost each other. They had lost the person who held everything together. Not Eleanor. Me. I was the mortar that had kept their crumbling bricks in place. I was the buffer that absorbed their friction so they wouldn't grind each other to dust. When they discarded me, they didn't just lose a caretaker. They lost the only thing standing between them and their own destruction. I watched the sold sticker go up on the sign a few weeks later. A young couple bought it. They painted the door blue. They planted tulips where Eleanor's roses used to be. The Matthews family was gone, erased, and I was still here in my yellow house, watching the tulips grow. Final chapter. What caretakers learned too late. The tulips are blooming across the street. They're bright red and yellow, cheerful and chaotic. Eleanor would have hated them. She liked order. She liked roses that stood in straight lines and thorns that drew blood if you touched them wrong. But Eleanor is gone, and the roses are gone. I sit on my porch sometimes and watch the new family. They have a dog. They have messy hair. They laugh loudly. They don't know that the dining room was a courtroom. They don't know that the kitchen was a prison. They don't know about the ghosts. And they don't know about me. To them, I'm just the neighbor in the yellow house who waves when they pull out of the driveway. I am not the angel. I am not the rock. I am not the security risk. I am just Sarah. It took me a long time to be okay with just being Sarah. For 3 years, I defined myself by how much I could give. I measured my worth in hours of sleep lost, in ibuprofen taken, in apologies swallowed. I thought that if I gave enough, if I loved enough, I could save them. But here is the truth I learned too late. You cannot save people who are determined to consume you. Some people don't value sacrifice. They feed on it. They're like black holes. No matter how much light you pour into them, it will never be enough to fill the void. The Matthews family didn't fall apart because I left. They fell apart because they were already broken. I wasn't the foundation. I was just the scaffolding holding up a ruin. And once the scaffolding was removed, gravity did the rest. I suffered quietly at their hands. I suffered in the dark on an Italian leather couch, believing that my suffering was noble. They suffered loudly at the hands of their own choices. They lost their money, their dignity, and each other because they valued control over connection and appearance over reality. That isn't revenge. That is consequence. I don't hate them anymore. Hate takes energy, and I am done giving them my energy. I don't pity them either. Pity assumes they were victims. They were the architects of their own disaster. I mostly just feel relief. I have my life back. It's a quieter life. It's a smaller life. But it is mine. I still help people. It's in my nature. I bring soup to a sick friend, but I buy the brand I like. I drive my neighbor to the airport, but I don't cancel my doctor's appointment to do it. I have learned the difference between helping and enabling. I have learned the difference between being a friend and being a doormat. And most importantly, I have learned that the first person I need to take care of is me. Because if I break, there is no one coming to fix me. There is no agency van. There is no professional team. There is just me and the life I have chosen to build. So, to all the caretakers out there, to the ones who are tired, to the ones who are giving until they are empty, stop. Look at the people you are saving. Are they saving you back? Or are they just eating? Don't wait until you are broken to realize that you are valuable. Don't wait until you are discarded to realize that you are not disposable. You are the gold. Don't let them treat you like the dross. Thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to tell, but silence protects the wrong people. If this story resonated with you, if you have ever felt the weight of being the strong one, please let me know in the comments. Share your story. You are not alone. And if you want to hear more stories like this, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on post notifications. It helps us share these truths with the people who need to hear them most. I'm Sarah, and I'm finally free.